As David awoke, his mind embraced the beauty of the dream he had, a wonderful visage of the future, one he wouldn't get, but one that warmed his heart. His mind allowed him to tear at the life well lived. He drew a shuddering breath and felt a slight heaviness on his chest, his eyes opening and settling on the face of his love. Her visage showed concern as her hand wiped away one of his tears. "David, why are you crying?" she asked, in a tone of a genuine desire to know, a wish to soothe his heart played behind it. "Nothing, my love. I had a beautiful dream, one of you and I and our children. These tears are for the majesty of that possible future," he said as his hand cupped her cheek and pulled her closer. "And I love you, so come here." He kissed her hard and passionately, his other hand wrapped around her shoulder and rolled her to her back. She pulled away, a bit shocked as they repositioned. His hand left her cheek and slid down her neck, his fingers digging lines in her fur, fingertips pressing on her warm and soft skin beneath. "David, what are you doing?" she said as his hand didn't deviate from its path. "I am doing what I want to do for you," he said as his other hand slipped to the back of her neck, raising her up a bit to keep kissing her. His exploring hand found her thigh and kept caressing it with a loving touch. She cupped his face and pushed him away. "Not today, my love. We both have work, and I need to focus on something other than what you want to do," she said with a smile, making him stop. He smiled back and leaned back in for a gentle kiss. "If that is what you wish, then I will respect it," he said softly, before rolling away quickly and getting to his feet. "Do you want to shower first, or should I?" as a cheeky smile took him. "Or we could shower at the same time." She smiles back as she got to her feet, taking his undershirt off her and tossing it at his face. "Only if you don't try anything, I do need a bit of help with my back," she said as she walked past him into the shower. "I will do my best, but you are extremely tempting," he said after the shirt tumbled off him into his feet, watching her enter and start. He himself found towels for both of them before joining her. David made his way over to the gym. He didn't have any immediate tasks this morning and decided that now would be a good time to work out. And he had a lot of pent-up energy from this morning. His shower with Alaris was way steamier than the water. He needed to get rid of the excess. David's body went into autopilot as his mind wandered. His thoughts dragged him to the mission. If this holy empire is based on the administratum, then there is a chance that any planet near their planet that once held life would have been destroyed and captured by them, like they tried to do with the Jiao arm. And the fact that they had captured and repurposed ships means that they likely are building up, probably transporting raw material from the planets to their home to process and make new war material out of. If they are doing that, then their population will be mostly dispersed, and if they are smart, they will have a contingency plan for the outcome of the mission. The administratum was built up on the belief that humans are the greatest form of life due to Earth's classification, being the only Class 5 death world. And they actively teach their children to not see anything not human as little more than animals, and use a blanket term of xeno to describe them. A thought that made David grit his teeth together in anger. They don't care for anything that would be admired by the Republic, not that he can't say that he didn't find some of the non-humans as annoying sometimes, but he doesn't hate them, and he would never wish for their eradication. But that is the impression he got from the ground forces commander. And it made him angry then as it did now. But what are the chances that there were those who disagreed with their nation's outlook? Could he find a way to save them? David wasn't sure if there was, but he had a new idea. One that was as stupid as it was dangerous, but one that may make him feel better about this whole thing. One he could do and would determine everything for him on whether or not to pull the metaphorical trigger. But his wandering was cut short as Jilris entered his line of sight and walked closer. She was watching him for a while now. He had seen her, but his mind didn't linger on it, but now started a recall of everything she had done while watching him. It was weird as he noted that she hadn't been working out despite being in workout clothes. David?" she asked hesitantly after getting in arm's reach. David leaned over, racking his weights, grabbed his towel to wipe his forehead and focused his head on her. "Yeah, Jilris, do you need something?" he said before taking a drink from his bottle. She stopped and averted her gaze for a second, Well. She seemed to think over her question once or twice before looking back to him. I was hoping you would spar with me. I don't understand how you beat Yayuli, and I need to understand how, as I have never beaten her. She said after a second and shot her hand to him with the palm down, effectively making it a formal request in her culture, something that her male kin hold as a great honor, to be asked a request from a female, a chance to prove their worth. David took her hand and carefully kissed it, accepting her request, and leaned back. I would be honored to help you, he said as he stood up and gestured to the passage to the combat training room with a smile. She beamed back to him and led the way, making more than a few Xandradanes look shocked, and all the Xandraphanes stared daggers at him for getting to fulfill her request. But he didn't pay them any mind, as a question about what she needed help on bubbled up. So, how exactly would sparring with me help you? She kept her pace but looked a bit over her shoulder. I figure if I can find a flaw in how you fought her, I may also find one in her attack pattern, she said bluntly. David wanted to laugh, but he knew that after that statement it would damage Yayoli's reputation more than soothe his humor. Tell you what, I think I'll stay defensive, as that is how I fought her. Also, you should be aware that in our trial I was also on the defense the whole battle, David said after a second, making her freeze in her tracks. She turned slowly to him, a bit of dread on her face, her mind obviously trying to piece together the idea that he wasn't fighting back. Wait, then what were all those times she fell away from you? She asked in a shaky voice, fear running amok in her posture. I was pushing her away, with either my hands or body, David said blankly, making most of the pack in earshot stop whatever they were doing and stare at him. How about I show you how I would fight offensively against one of the target bags? Jilris slowly nodded as he took the lead and walked right up to a bag. It was a lot like a punching bag from Earth, but had the benefit of being made of hardened hyperweave, making it resistant to cuts, so pack members could use it to their heart's content. David took his preferred stance for attacking, his main hand close to his right cheek and closed tight into a fist, his weak hand forward but a few inches and open palm pointing at an angle to the bag with his pinky. His whole body turned a bit leading with the left shoulder and foot, toes at his target. His feet were just a bit more the shoulder length apart, and his knees a bit bent, his back foot at a 45-degree angle to the bag, too. He sucked in a hard breath, pushing on his diaphragm as air filled his lungs. He was still a bit worn from the workout until now, but figured if he puts on a good show, then it would be fine. He closed his eyes for a second, summoning a mental image of a Hyakish over the bag, a wish to slay the beast coming up, and as his eyes snapped open, he went for it. In a burst of movement, he jabs forward, followed by a powerful right hook and a hard gut jab by his left as he stepped closer, then a powerful knee with his right leg, sending the bag to the end of its chains and making the lower one snap. As he returned to his starting point, he looked over to a pack of Xandraphanes inching away along with Jilris. But he smiled. Yeah, so that's my opening attack pattern against a Hyakish, but I don't know if I would use it in real life. Combat is fluid, David said as he relaxed and thought over his attack pattern. I may stay a bit more range, but then I would have to deal with its claws. So you really didn't fight Yayuli? Jilris finally said. None of us can match you, can we? Her fear at the idea of fighting him for real. David laughed and turned to face them completely. Yeah, in a one-on-one fight, none of you can match a human, but how do your kind fight when at war? He asked, making most of them stop moving as they thought about his question. Jilris snapped up to him as she realized something. We fight in packs of 5 to 20. There you go. If you ever find yourselves in a fight with a hostile human, then your best bet for survival is numbers. He gestured to the 30 or so Xandraphane pack here in front of him. I would have trouble fighting more than 3 of you, especially if you are working as a team. 4 would be hard as hell, and I'd never win without injury. And 5 is impossible for me. He walked a bit forward. Just remember that the numbers I just said would work only with me. Every human would be different depending on that human's skills and physical abilities. I hope this helps you, Jilris. If it has not, then I'm willing to spar, he said with a gentle smile. Jilris shook her head before thinking carefully about it, then looked back to David. Can you teach me how to fight like you? She asked slowly. David smiled to comfort her, then took a step closer. I can do my best, but my packmate Samantha is a better teacher, and she knows more fighting styles. David said slowly as he looks around and locked his gaze on her again. I see. You are saying your style may not work with my body, and she would be a better teacher, Jilris said after a few seconds of staring at him. Okay, thank you, David Solomon, Cusiafane of Clan Hincarno, she said with a waved flourish at David, a signal that she acknowledged her request finished. David gave her a shallow bow. And thank you for the honor of being of aid to you, Jilris Hincarno, No of Clan Hincarno, he said as he lowered his head a bit more, so he could only see her feet and only moved as she started to turn and walk away. As the crowd breaks up as they all take in what he said, he finds a soft hand pressing on his back, followed by a soft chuckle. Good job, my Cusiafane, Alaris said as she came round to his side. Her uniform is a bit disheveled from her rushing over to the gym. You did well to teach them information and redirecting them to a better teacher. Also, you made it clear to a few that they can't beat me for leadership as long as you are my only mate. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. David watched as she left, still a bit stunned at the public display in line of sight with her pack, but just smiled after a second. His mind settled on a new path for him to take. David had reached the bridge to help the captain as the fleet from Earth would be arriving at any second. David stood by the captain, his stance a bit more rigid than he wanted, but he was ready and his breath steady. Captain, we are detecting FTL arrival signatures. 7 light seconds away. The count is... The sensor officer started, but stopped for a few seconds before looking back. The count is 210, sir. The captain leaned over a bit. David? He asked, wanting to know if that would be the actual fleet from Earth. Fifth Fleet is about 110 ships, sir, and last I heard the first volunteer fleet of the Red Cross had about 50. It's safe to assume that this is the fleet from Earth, David said as he looked over the data his tablet showed. As for the extra ships, there is a chance that it is civilian volunteers looking to spread goodwill and help the Jiao Anarm. Be ready to hail their flagships, said the captain to his officers. David watched as the counter for their estimated arrival counted down, and the fleet of ships popped back into real space, the sensors finding the IFFs of each and started marking them as soon as they noted who they are. The 3 terminals rose up in front of the captain as hails were answered by 3 people. The central one was the first to answer. It looked like a human woman close to her 50s, dressed in a flight uniform and a lab coat. Her gray eyes showed more experience than David cared to guess at, and her fading red hair was tied back into a bun. The left one shows another woman that David recognized as the Admiral of the Fifth Fleet. Her red eyes were a choice on her part after she had lost both in a boarding action in her second tour, and her face carried a single scar that cut across both eyes horizontally. Her hair was cut short and kept in a tight ponytail, partly hidden by her hat. Her battle dress uniform was clean and closed tight. The last one was a bit tubby-looking man dressed in a flight suit and had an old hat from pre-first contact on, but he looked definitely young. Probably in his early 20s, his green eyes reminded David of his own, and pale blonde hair was cut short. The captain looked from one terminal to the next. Thank you all for coming. I am Captain Clutho Hirosil, captain of the Galactic Exploration Vessel 105. Beside me is the man that had taken command of the ground efforts, the human liaison officer, David Solomon. The captain said carefully and finished with a wave at David, which David took as a cue to wave. Greetings, Captain. I am Admiral Natalie Traynor. It is a pleasure to meet you. I hope David and my daughter aren't giving you a hard time, the Admiral said with a smile, making the captain look back to David, a hint of confusion in his eye. She was mine and Samantha's commander during the Jack Cale War, sir, and she is Samantha's brood mother, David informed him, making the captain nod, as the information made things a bit clearer. Hello, Captain Clutho. I am Dr. Leia Silverman. While we are here for the native population, we will be happy to help treat any injured you still have. We have plenty of supplies, said the doctor as she noted the end of the information exchange with a warm and caring smile. Thank you, Doctor. I'll have my communications officer pass you the codes to speak with my medical staff. I believe there are a few that still need help, the captain said with an appreciative nod. Greetings, Captain. I am Captain James Shepard. I have been nominated by the Free Spacer Guild. We are here to aid and help the natives reach the minimum tech level for entry into the council," the man said with a wide grin, making David cough loud to get the man to not show his teeth, luckily having the desired effect. "Yes, thank you for coming," said the captain after settling his posture. "I believe that David should give you a debrief of the situation." The captain waved his wing at David. "Thank you, Captain," David stepping a bit forward. "About 7 days ago, we arrived in this system and began our surveying of the system. We soon found glitches in both our sensor system and the scouting drone. These glitches made it look like the planet X5001C, here onward referred to as John Cool, as an uninhabited garden world, however. As you can see, it has been turned into a barren world. This was in fact caused not by anything except an attempt to exterminate the local population. We had started search and rescue, however, the perpetrators returned to finish their unacceptable task, and I made the call for a North Star, while I was coordinating the efforts to evacuate the population." He read through the notes of the situation. "The attackers surrounded our ground base and stopped our efforts to evacuate the locals. In an effort to save more of the locals, I broke laws 12 and 17 of our laws. The Scythe of Dawn arrived a few hours after the humans under my command are engaged in full battle. We had successfully eliminated the enemies, but they had called for backup from their ship, hence why the Scythe is still in the system. They are lingering near where the transport ship had arrived from. That is the baseline for the current state of affairs. Also, we have 6 Vil Honest that are willing to stay and act as translators. They and the locals called Jiao Arm have close evolutionary ties, and their native dialects are close enough to allow communication. We are transmitting a full breakdown of the events leading up to your arrival," David said before taking a step back. The three of them nodded along, and the Admiral looked hard for a second. "David, you said the enemy ship called for reinforcements," she said before narrowing her eyes on him. "Where is this ship now?" "It is grounded planetside. The Jiao Arm have been told to avoid boarding it as there may be traps. I had them wait for the fleet to arrive, as you will have men skilled in bomb disposal," David said back slowly. "Good. I'll send down an EOD team soon," she said back and looked back to the captain. "I don't know if this matters, but David and his team are all extremely skilled individuals. I recommend you trust in their advice. Have a good day, Captain. The supply ship will make contact on its own soon," she added before disconnecting. "Captain, do you know how many of the Jiao Arm, right?" The doctor started and looked to David, getting a nod for the right name of the locals. "The Jiao Arm are down there?" They had done a count during the evacuation. They said they have about 1.5 million left. The captain said calmly, but a sour note of pain resonated in his voice. David saw that the doctor had noticed the captain's tone, and David coughed to get the doctor's attention. "When we arrive, they estimated their population was about 3 million. We didn't manage to save more than half of them, but the ones that were lost were incinerated by the enemies, and the Yawanam tradition calls for a burial." "I see. I will see to sending some counselors to help them grief. Thank you for all your work," the doctor said before disconnecting. "So do you guys know the current situation on the ground?" asked Captain Shepard, his eyes wandering a bit off screen, probably reading out information. "I believe that the Scythe had set up temporary houses, but they have a lot to rebuild. However, the Jiao Arm have asked that we request anyone capable to help them finish the terraforming," the captain said after a second. "We can't do much in that regard, but we can set up enclosed habitats so they wouldn't need to worry so much, and we can take a look at what they have and help along. But we don't have access to full-on Terra tech," said the spacer captain. "They will appreciate it anyway," the captain added before the spacer disconnected, and then the Larashi captain turned to David and let out a long sigh. "What do you think? The Admiral is smart, and she likes to stay a step ahead. The doctor is known in the Republic, and if she thinks it's necessary, she will call for more aid. The spacer is the unknown here, but I know about his guild. They are the ones that built most of our current infrastructure. They make our ships, station, relay buoys, and shipyards. This James Shepard is the designer of the Guardian-class battleship like the Scythe," David added after a second of looking over some information on his tablet. The captain lets out a whistle and nodded at the information. "So? We can depart without worry then?" David takes in a deep breath, thinking over everything he knows about all this, and breathed it out slowly. I think that should be fine after we are resupplied. The ship carrying for our provisions is part of the logistics corps, so they will jump away right about the same time as us, David said after a second and ran his hand through his hair. As for the protection of this world, the Fifth Fleet will take over, and the Scythe would depart too. The ships of the Red Cross will start helping the Jau Honorm. They have about 7 provision ships full of food and clean water, enough to feed the locals for 10 Earth years. So, yes, I do believe that our departure will not affect this situation anymore. The captain nodded, along with David's assessment. I must say, David, I am starting to like you. I think I may recommend that a human contingent be added to any council-led ship out there in the void, the captain said after a second. Thank you for your help, David, and I'll see you tomorrow for the ceremony. Dismissed.